This ship needs a hyperdrive. We don't have that part.
Maybe we could find one.
What do you think? A spaceship is just gonna appear out of the blue?
Are you kidding me? The same bit?
This might be the right galaxy after all.
No one blasts them like hot, smuggles past them like hot.
No one slices a tauntaun in Aspen like hot.
And I killed Boba Fett without even trying.
Who do we want?
It is 5:16 p.m. on Thursday, May 24th, 2018, and as soon as I finish recording this intro, I will be on my way to the Regal La Habra Stadium 16 in beautiful La Habra, California, to catch a 7 p.m. screening of Solo, a Star Wars story. I'm some jerk with a camera, and welcome to One Movie Later, where I compare and contrast my preconceptions and postconceptions of movies in theaters now. Wow, a Star Wars movie about a young Han Solo, directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. What a time to be alive. I've been a huge fan of these guys ever since Clone High, and it's been so intensely gratifying to watch them slowly conquer Hollywood, and in particular become the kings of taking extremely questionable properties and making them not just work, but work brilliantly. The same lunatics who brought their special brand of cartoony anarchic genius to Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and 21 Jump Street and 22 Jump Street and the freaking Lego Movie are now being given the keys to the Star Wars universe. And sure, the trailers for Solo have kinda made it look like a generic action movie. I dare say even a painfully generic action movie, but I'm sure that's just the trailers. I can't wait to see what Lord and Miller bring... Opie?
Hit the hyperdrive!
Why would you do that? No, seriously, why would you do that? I mean, nothing against Ron Howard personally. He seems like a really nice guy, which in and of itself is exceptionally rare in Hollywood, especially among directors. But I'm sorry, why would you replace the guys who have never made a bad movie with the guy who's never made a great one? Granted, he's made a few good ones, Apollo 13, Splash, Lord knows I'll always have a soft spot for Willow. And I've never actually seen Backdraft, but apparently it was good enough to get its own Universal attraction. Of course, so was Transformers, but he's never made a masterpiece. He's the guy who made EdTV and The Dilemma and the Da Vinci Code trilogy and the Jim Carrey Grinch movie. Ugh.
We gotta stop Ron Howard! Stop it, Ron Howard!
He's the guy that George Lucas would have hired to direct the other Star Wars movies, and Disney got rid of that guy for a reason. Even at his best, Ron Howard's movies are adequate. That's the best way to describe them. He's a workman, not a craftsman. Sometimes he has good material to work with, but he never transcends his material, which Lord and Miller literally always do. So right away, I think it's an awful decision. But to add insult to injury, they didn't even bother to fire them until they'd been shooting the movie for 5 months. Do you have any idea how much it costs to shoot for 5 months on one of these massive blockbusters? They basically threw the costs of several dozen small movies into the Death Star trash compactor just to get rid of these guys. That's some low-down DCEU shit right there. But they weren't respecting Lawrence Kasdan's script enough. Well, I mean, that's understandable. These know-nothing whippersnappers have only had the Midas touch on literally every project they've gotten their hands on. Who are they to argue with the disapproving scoldy finger of the director of Dreamcatcher? Weren't these non-episodic Star Wars stories supposed to be the place where directors could experiment and make Star Wars universe movies in different subgenres that didn't necessarily have to feel like Star Wars movies? Instead, Lucasfilm reshot Rogue One into mediocrity and replaced the Lego Movie guys with Richie Cunningham. And the only recent Star Wars movie that does feel like an auteur's risky experiment is one of the official episodes, oddly enough. For God's sake, Lord and Miller turned down the Ghostbusters reboot to do this. Given their track record, they might have actually managed to make a Ghostbusters movie that satisfied everyone. But instead, the internet turned into an even more wretched hive of scum and villainy for nothing! You know, This ain't the 80s anymore. You can't just replace Eric Stoltz with Michael J. Fox and expect no one to notice these days. We have the internet now. It's what you're watching me on. And shit like this and firing Edgar Wright from Ant-Man has unintended consequences. We all start putting qualifiers on these damn movies. Even if it's good, it'll never quite be good enough for us because we'll always wonder what might have been. You're not just replacing a director, you're replacing your audience's goodwill with suspicion. And that's how movies become forgotten after the dust has settled. But who cares, right? We're all gonna see this movie on opening day anyway, and this whole A Star Wars story rigmarole is looking more and more like a failed experiment all the time. Hey, we just bought Star Wars. What do the fans want to see? I know, more prequels! And the sheer apathy from Disney on this one is almost palpable. They didn't even release the first teaser until February. They released the teaser for the Nutcracker and the Four Realms first, and that doesn't come out for another 5 months. Granted, maybe they didn't want anyone to confuse this for The Last Jedi, but the MCU had 2 movies in the top 5 last month, and no one was confused there. You know, of the new crop of Disney-owned Star Wars movies, this is the only one getting a proper Memorial Day weekend release date like God intended, and no one cares. Times have changed, and now May is Marvel territory, even when their movie comes out in April. So, is there anything I'm actually excited about with this movie? Ooh, Donald Glover is playing young Lando. That's pretty cool. And also, Donald Glover is playing young Lando. Oh, and I almost forgot. Young Lando will be played by America's sweetheart himself, Donald Glover. And Chewbacca's in it. And according to the character posters, they got him to play himself. Man, what a coup. And thanks to this movie, some lucky bastards in Florida actually got to ride Star Tours with Chewie like they've been falsely advertising for the last 3 decades. And speaking of the parks, Galaxy's Edge opens next year, obviously. Maybe this will be the movie that finally introduces Batuu into the mythos. And maybe the Millennium Falcon ride will have some sort of basis in this movie? I mean, it'd be much easier to get the would that it were so simple guy than Harrison friggin' Ford. Look, I know it sounds like I've already decided I hate this movie before I even see it, and if I'm being honest, maybe I have, but I will still try my damnedest to give it a fair shot. Maybe the odds are against it being good, but we all know how Han feels about the odds.
Keep your heroes down to earth like Marlon Brando. Smooth as butter, cooler than a lick, that's why they call me
Lando.
Okay, we got a slightly smaller band of misfits this time than normal, but that's okay. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm white and brunette, so cast me as your next Star Wars female lead. I got a yellow Lando cup. I'm Morgan, aka The Wire. I'm back.
I'm Nick, and I actually prefer scoundrel to misfit.
Well, don't we all? Well, how do you feel about Miscreant? Where do you stand there?
I love Miscreant.
We just saw Solo, A Star Wars Story. Yeah, that's what I would rate it. It's got some really standout sequences. There's the stuff that works really works well. The stuff, it never gets outright terrible. I did like it more than I thought I would. It's okay, not great, and maybe might have been elevated in the Lord and Miller version. For the most part, it's just kind of pleh. I think it's just mediocre enough to be completely forgotten a year from now.
I liked it. I thought it was perfectly fine for what it was, and in a lot of ways it's more unique than a lot of the Star Wars movies, but I'll admit that the second act was a little stronger than the other 2 acts.
Well, I thought the third act was actually the strongest one. Not to spoil anything, but there's a lot of plot twists all in a row. That really worked for me.
This doesn't have the myth-making or the sort of timeless mystical quality that the Star Wars episode movies has, but what it does have is adventures that get progressively more complicated and dangerous as the movie goes on, and as people shift alliances, and as their hidden agendas are revealed, and oh, this person was a bad guy, but no, actually they're a good guy, and no, this good guy is actually a bad guy, but no, they're not that bad guy, they're a different bad guy. It's the sort of writery, I'm into the mystery, I'm actually figuring out all these characters' motivations, and writers love doing mystery novels for exactly that reason, because you get to toss up all of these different threads and then bring them together.
It's really not so much a mystery, though, as it is a gangster movie. For as long as I can remember, I dreamed of being a nerf herder.
This is the heist movie
Yeah.
that I kind of wish Rogue One had been.
Okay, let's explore like the more morally gray side of things.
They make a big deal early in the movie of saying, don't trust anybody, so you just know that there are double crosses coming.
But for the most part, when it wasn't doing that, it was just kind of meh, because it was just kind of the same hero's journey story that we've seen a million times. And
Well, it's kind of a hero's journey in reverse, though, because Han starts out really starry-eyed and idealistic, and this is about him sort of losing that innocence.
I had a big problem with the fact that he started off a hero and had kind of the arc away from it, because his arc in the original trilogy is from not giving a damn to being a hero.
Right.
So to be like, oh, he started out this kid who's like idealistic and in love with this girl and spends 3 years pining for this girl and I just want to be a pilot.
Yeah.
And then to be like, oh yeah, then after 3 years of pining for this girl, in a very short span of time, he goes from that to I am not a hero.
Well,
I am not gonna help.
Well, he's clearly not there yet. Like,
Right.
and that's kind of and he's the only guy who doesn't know it. Everyone around him is like, get a load of this kid. I think their end point is the Han who shot first.
Yeah.
Right. If it takes the entire arc from the beginning of Han's story to that point for him to get there, and then that's the beginning of him moving back, that means he never really was the Han Solo we all thought he was. Because there was no, like...
Well, it means that he changes with the times. When Han showed up again in The Force Awakens, and he's still wearing the same clothes, he's still doing the same job, he's still in trouble with basically the same people. And it's like 30 years and a failed marriage and a kid who turned out to be a psycho murderer haven't changed him at all.
They really boxed in the story of Han. None of the Han Solo stories happened before that. And then the place where they drop off the movie is clearly really soon before A New Hope.
Well, no, it can't be because of the timeline. Because we're still in pre-Star Wars Rebels time. If you don't watch children's cartoons, Star Wars Rebels follows the formation of the Rebel Alliance. For reasons, let me just say, this has to be at least 10 years before the start of A New Hope.
Really?
Yes.
I should sing solo. See, so low we can't hear you.
The way I thought the movie was set up, as a layman knowing nothing about the Rebels series, my impression was this ends like a year before A New Hope. If it ends like 10 years before A New Hope and there's time for other Han Solo stories, that removes a lot of my problems.
Yeah.
It basically really wants to answer those questions you've had about Han Solo. Like, oh, how did he get that Millennium Falcon anyway?
Well, I never really had those questions about Han Solo, though.
One of the biggest flaws of this movie is that they don't answer the right questions about Han at times.
And I've heard a lot of faint praise for this movie going around that said like, oh, it's just the story of how Han got his stuff. So if you care about Han's stuff, you're going to care about this movie.
No, it is about more than that.
One of the hot takes that we heard practically as soon as this movie was announced was, nobody asked for this, who was asking for this, who wanted this. Two very important people wanted this. One was George Lucas. Before he even sold Lucasfilm, he was talking to Lawrence Kasdan about doing a movie with young Han Solo. And the other was Lawrence Kasdan himself.
Han Solo is the favorite character in the history of Star Wars, with the possible exception of BB-8. Like, if you're gonna do movies that aren't 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, however far you want to go, that are just in the Star Wars universe, everyone wanted to see a Han Solo movie.
Maybe an actor who also really seems to love playing him, like compared to Harrison Ford, and hell, even Harrison Ford loved how he was played in this movie.
People might say, oh, we want a Han Solo movie, but do they really? It's kind of like how the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise was ruined as soon as they made Jack Sparrow the lead character. It's like a character like that is perfect for just kind of background comic relief type stuff, but do you really want him as the focal point? I think this film did that okay, just not great.
I think that's why he was less the Han who shot first, less the rogue, and more the starry-eyed. This is his Luke, as close as he ever was to like the farm boy.
Oh God, we're gonna get a Jack Sparrow origin story movie. Oh God.
No, don't do it.
This is part of.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jinx it. I'm sorry.
This is part of why I had a problem with them doing this character arc for him. Was it felt like they didn't know how to write a movie about Han Solo, so they just made him the typical hero, and were like, and hinted at he would become Han Solo. When I really wanted to see how would you make a movie about Han Solo.
You do actually care about the characters created just for the film, for me, a lot more than I cared about the characters created just for Rogue One, for example. Like I loved Woody Harrelson's character, for example,
I liked Andy Newton's character.
She was great.
L3.
L3
was fantastic. I loved Paul Bettany's character.
Interesting point, just to bring up the Empire. I thought it was really interesting that they weren't the main antagonist of the film.
No.
That it was a corporation that was actually the main
a crime syndicate.
Yeah,
crime syndicate. Okay,
it's kind of like
but who worked in conjunction with the government, so that basically not really crime syndicate anymore.
That is a really good point, though. Functionally, the only difference between a corporation and a crime syndicate is legality. When you think about it.
Since most corporations don't do legal shit anyway.
But they get away with it.
The Empire likes to subcontract their dirty work.
Donald Glover as Lando is
perfect
the man.
Casting.
He is so damn...
I think the cast in general is pretty strong.
I've heard people say that this should have been the Lando movie, because who really cares about Han anymore? We want to see a Lando movie. I'm kind of torn between agreeing just because Donald Glover as Lando is easily the best character in this movie, but also thinking maybe he could wear out his welcome if the movie was all about him.
Yeah, they don't really focus on what made us want a Lando movie, which is how he became ambassador of Cloud City.
If we did a Lando movie at this stage in his life, it would basically be a Han Solo movie, but not Han Solo.
But they do reference that he keeps winning different businesses in his card games. That seems to kind of be his thing.
Yeah.
And then he either tries to succeed at them or runs them into the ground.
So he's the Disney company.
Now that they've done the Solo movie, I would love to see a Lando movie offshoot of that. It might not be good, but I'd still love to see it.
Right.
But I don't think they could have just done a Lando movie.
Buddy cop movie. Buddy cop movie with Han and Lando.
Buddy Stormtrooper movie.
It felt older even than Star Wars. Like, this is a weekly serial where you would show up at the Penny Theater and you would see the next adventure, and they would always end on a cliffhanger and then they'd pick right up. It's where Star Wars came from.
Right at the beginning, the first 20 or 30 minutes.
Right.
What it reminded me the most of was actually Temple of Doom. It wasn't. It was the beginning, how they kind of drop you in the middle of.
Wrote that.
There's a chase sequence. Oh, that makes a lot of okay. But like how it starts off like chase sequence, then okay, brief respite, then another action sequence.
If it's Temple of Doom, does that mean they're gonna eat that Jon Favreau monkey's brains?
Don't judge his culture's funereal rites.
And in concept, I love a lot of what they did with that in the movie. That being said, in execution, I thought most of the movie was pretty bad. I think I'm in the minority opinion, but I actually think this was a bad movie.
I think the bones of it were so good. When you outline the film and be like, this is the basic structure, the basic concept, I think that was gold. In concept, everything was perfect. In execution, I felt everything was on a scale of kind of good, but mostly mediocre to really bad.
Leave it to Opie!
I could see scenes where I went, wow, you can really tell they fired the directors halfway through. Like, I don't think it's I don't think it's Lord and Miller's fault, I don't think it's Ron Howard's fault, but when you fire the directors halfway through a movie, you're lucky to get a functioning movie at the end of it. I wasn't crazy about the love story.
Yeah, I don't think we were supposed to be crazy about it.
Some of the emotional scenes, I was like, this is just badly directed. The camera work is like, lock it on a tripod and just hope they're in the shot. The acting feels like we didn't have enough time to get enough takes. And the editing's kind of awkward. Like, everything about it was just, whoever was helming this did not have a vision for this scene, and they needed a vision for this scene.
Sometimes the cinematography Sometimes, damn, it looked really good, but then other scenes were so freaking dark, I couldn't see anything, and it would bother me, honestly.
I can understand why Kasdan would love the script.
Yeah.
And would be upset at Lord and Miller if they kept deviating from the script for the sake of jokes.
If you don't want jokes, why are you hiring Lord and Miller?
Yeah.
They must have not vetted Lord and Miller's working process properly.
They just looked at the box office grosses for the Lego movie and were like, okay, these guys.
I say that because I'm certain Lord and Miller, when they found out, like, what, you want us to do a Star Wars movie?
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
of course, we'll do whatever you want. And then when they were actually shooting, they kept going off and doing improv and doing their own thing.
Turn down Ghostbusters for it.
I really liked this movie. I thought it was a fun time at the theater. It feels very much like what I want an adventure serial in the Star Wars universe to feel like.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It improved a lot of the things that Rogue One did, but I think that Rogue One had a better ending in a way.
It definitely did. Yeah, I don't think anything in this movie is better than the ending of Rogue One.
Want to hear the most lame cop-out non-opinion that I nevertheless think is how it's going to be?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what this show's for.
Okay, I saw so many quote-unquote reviews that, again, did the whole damning with faint praise thing, like, oh, well, it's not going to shake the world, I'm not going to remember it in, like, 10 minutes, it's just there, it's fine, I guess, it's not a disaster, but blah, 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 blah. I could write a review of this movie using that same...
Using predictive text,
Using predictive text, just based on all of that. Well, it's kind of okay, and well, like L3 is alright. I think this is one of those movies that is going to take some time for people to evaluate its quality honestly.
Yeah.
I think right now we've all still got our brains scrambled by...
We got a chip on our shoulder over the Lord and Miller firing.
There are certain people out there who are either still had their brains blown out of their skulls, whether they loved it or hated it, by The Last Jedi.
Last Jedi kind of did the whole deconstruction of the typical Star Wars story better.
The Last Jedi would be the prestige hardcover special event comic, and this would just be the $3 comic you'd pick up off the rack.
And somehow this has a boycott tag, even though it's the first frickin', I don't know, Star Wars movie under Disney to star a white man.
I think this movie is one of those films that everyone's gonna damn with faint praise while it's in theaters and then claim to forget about and then rediscover in about 10 years and realize it's brilliant. This movie was showing us a lot of stuff that could show up in subsequent movies.
This movie definitely does not skimp on the continuity porn.
No, no, it doesn't. But again, that's a thing that serial movies do. It's very comic book in that way. You're not given everything. Like, this is just part of a story. Not in the sense that you didn't actually see a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, but after the end, it's like, we still don't know certain things, and that's why you'd show up at the comic book store and buy the next one. I would be surprised if the Boba Fett movie they've had in development for so long doesn't tie into the events of this movie somehow.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
Yeah, and the Obi-Wan movie, which they... What? That one's been in the rumor mill for a very long time because, you know, Ewan's the right age for it.
I've also heard a Yoda movie bandied about, but I don't know.
I'm against that.
I'm against a Yoda movie.
What I'd really like to see from the Star Wars cinematic universe, as it now basically is films that don't feel like Star Wars. And I feel like every Star Wars story film promises to be that and then never delivers. It just kind of hits the same beats as a lot of other Star Wars movies. Clearly Disney wanted another MCU. They want, okay, you know, the Marvel thing's working really well, let's try it again with Star Wars. But part of the reason why the Marvel Cinematic Universe works is because every franchise legitimately feels like a different kind of movie, at least slightly. Guardians of the Galaxy is a space opera. Black Panther is Afrofuturist. You know, Thor is straight up fantasy. Ant-Man is more of a comedy heist movie. You know, they all take place in the same universe, but they all feel very much like different genres. Every Star Wars movie so far has just, on some level, felt like a Star Wars movie, and it's just not as interesting to do it that way. That's why I really want Rian Johnson to do like a whole new trilogy that takes place somewhere else entirely and still takes place in the same universe but feels very different. That's, I think, what Star Wars needs in order to boost some new life into it.
But the reason they can never achieve that the way Marvel did is because they didn't start with 4 or 5 different standalone movies that are equally valid as your first film to watch and then merge them. They started with, these are the Star Wars movies. Right. And now it's, these are other Star Wars movies.
Which is why I think that this movie, especially if it winds up tying into the Boba Fett film, could be a way forward because it is so comic booky and it is so kind of lore heavy. How much time do you want to spend in this universe?
I think we're about ready to go into spoilers now, and hang on. Guys, I don't quite know how to say this, but I've just been fired from this vlog. Yeah, I've been fired from the vlog, and there's nothing I can do about it. It feels weird to replace me so far into the vlog, but okay, I guess that's what we gotta do.
Okay, let's get into spoilers.
Yay!
She works under Darth Maul.
Dun dun dun!
I hated that so much. I hadn't seen Rebels, so I didn't realize it was established that he was back.
Not only is he in Rebels, but he has a big arc in the Clone Wars.
I hadn't seen any episodes of Clone Wars or Rebels with Darth Maul, but I just knew from the internet that Darth Maul comes back in the series. But actually bringing him back in the movie felt very much like if Infinity War had ended with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. showing up. Hey, you were supposed to pay attention to all of this lore that was going on your television this whole time.
That feels very comic booky to me.
Logically, there's a tiered system of importance of like this franchise. You have the numbered movies, then you have the other movies, then you have the TV stuff. Like, in terms of what can you reasonably expect casual audience members to see? As someone who saw the movie, if I wasn't sitting with people who could tell me Darth Maul was in the TV show, I'd have walked away from it being like, so wait, this takes place before The Phantom Menace? Fuck you, movie! There's no way Han 60 in the A New Hope. The turducken of continuity is such that...
What they're hoping happens at that point is then a friend of yours goes, oh yeah, he's in the TV show. You want to watch those episodes? Because he's really great in the TV show.
My response is no, it's dumb that he's alive. You got cut the fucking
head.
Well,
the fact that it's dumb he's alive, we can thank George Lucas for that, because he was in the writer's room working on the Clone Wars. You know, it would be really great if we could bring Darth Maul back.
You mean
and then one of the continuity guys was like, well, he died, didn't he? And George Lucas was like...
Who cares?
To understand how dumb that is, I need to harken back to one of my favorite fan films growing up. The Empire Strikes Back Yard.
This isn't possible. Obi-Wan killed you.
His unfortunate bisection was nothing a bit of stitching couldn't fix.
That's literally what it is!
Okay. At the same time, I can understand that, oh, important plot stuff is happening. I suddenly stopped listening because I'm trying to figure out what Darth Maul is doing here.
My disappointment about Darth Maul was that he wasn't played by Ferb.
I don't think he was even voiced by Peter Serafinowicz this time.
He was voiced by a Sam Witwer who voiced him in the TV show.
Appealing to my favorite TV show, Star Wars.
Yeah. We saw this in a surprisingly uncrowded theater.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of moments in this film that were clearly going for applause moments, like, you know, first reveal of the Falcon, first reveal of Chewie, and the audience didn't really react The audience lost their fucking mind at the reveal of Darth Maul. So clearly I'm wrong, but it still felt to me like this is going to confuse more people than it's going to satisfy.
I feel like the problem is that it connects to the movie that everybody hates the most.
They did set up that they were going to connect to Phantom Menace by mentioning that Beckett killed Aura Singh,
yes.
whose previous only movie appearance was she stands up on a ledge watching the pod race.
I remember that was such a big deal when the Phantom Menace was coming out. She had, like, some magazine had her as the cover, and it was like, oh, she's gonna be in the Phantom Menace, and it's like that one shot during the pod race.
She's the one who trained Boba Fett.
They also mentioned Bosk in the movie. That's the other bounty hunter who got a name drop. This movie wasn't greenlit with casual fans in mind.
It doesn't even have the usual opening scrawl.
That threw me, that it had title cards in the a long time ago color and font, and I was like, what's happening?
The TV show had an actual old-timey announcer voice who would, who would...
If that had happened, I would have so blamed Miller and Lord, and apparently it wouldn't have been their fault.
They don't go so deep into, like, the actual parts of Han's backstory that nobody had any theories about. So we find out Han had a dad.
It's like...
We're not that close. It's like, no shit, you're street scum who are basically slaves. Of course your family unit isn't that strong.
I mean, he literally got his last name from a fucking guard.
That was so on the nose for me. And the fact that it wasn't even like Han was the one who just said Solo and it's implied, oh, because he's on his own. But instead it's like, I have no people. Okay, Han Solo, Han Loner, Han Bad Boy.
Han Single Rider.
It was a moment of humanity from an Imperial officer, and I feel like this series really doesn't show that.
Yeah.
Do we really want to be humanizing the evil, all-encompassing Empire in this particular day and age?
Well, if some of them wind up defecting to the rebels...
But we already got that with Finn. We already got a humanized stormtrooper.
That's the First Order. That's a different
thing. That's the first... You're right.
It was showing like a lot of stormtroopers like separating people from their families and kind of like demanding ID from, especially from droids. I'm like, gee, that doesn't represent anything in the real world.
Yeah. The same people who complain about Kathleen Kennedy's SJW agenda are complaining about L3 because she's blatantly the SJW droid.
Even though she's
equality for all, and that's apparently a bad thing.
Even though, like, I thought her handling was a little tone deaf.
Lando kind of snickers at her wanting freedom. When they program her into the ship, I was half expecting her to go howl and just fucking kill them all.
See, she's a pilot droid, so she was a Rex JW.
When she accidentally freed all of the robots, it's like the house elves from Harry Potter in the final battle
it
of
wasn't
Hogwarts.
an accident. She just took the bolt off one of them, and then that one, it started a snowball, and she's like,
but
this is so great!
But she wasn't like, hey, if I take off this restraining bolt, I could start a revolution. She's like, get out of my way. It's like, what should I do? I don't know. Free your brethren. I actually think that was the best scene in the movie. Everything on Kessel. The scenes with Han and Lando shooting side by side, I thought the camera work there, the lighting and color scheme, that was all really good. I don't think anything else in the movie was on that level.
And another thing... Hang on, I got a text. Oh, so I just got fired too. They say they want somebody blonder?
I'm extremely qualified for this job.
Wait, who are you?
Oh, I'm KAYLEIGH. I used to work at Disneyland with Chewbacca.
How did he move on from fighting along Yoda's side to being captured in a mud pit?
Well, the Imperials beat them and took him captive, I think.
You're not KAYLEIGH.
Damn it! I've been doing everything wrong!
I think about how awful it is to have wet hair when you get out of the shower. I cannot imagine being covered in just... Oh, poor Chewie.
When he goes, we couldn't do this one at a time. I understand Chewie being like, no, you were in that mud pit for 3 seconds. I've been in there for, who knows, maybe 3 years. I have a lot more fur caked in mud.
You know, they established early on that Chewie needs to get home to either his tribe or his family, so they're still keeping it ambiguous as to whether the holiday special is canon. But they never really have Chewie fully switch from, I need to go home to be with my tribe, to, I'm sticking by your side forever, Han.
That's when they're talking about what they're going to do with the money. and they never get the money.
I guess that's true.
So theoretically, that's his character motivation moving forward.
So in Solo 2, when they fuck up serving Jabba the Hutt...
Solo 2, or as we call it, Duo.
Not to be confused with Duel, which is a Spielberg movie.
I've always enjoyed the idea of seeing Star Wars movies that weren't just about Jedi. Like with Rogue One, I thought that was neat, and I enjoyed this element too, just seeing more of the universe. And
This movie came so close to being the first Star Wars movie to not have a lightsaber in it. Until we got to Darth Maul at the end. This was the first Star Wars movie...
It's just a hologram of a lightsaber, though.
But still, it was a transmission. This was the first Star Wars movie to not have 3PO and R2 in it.
But it did have Anthony Daniels in it. He played the Wookiee who Chewbacca rescues during the breakout.
This also was the first Star Wars movie where we see Warwick Davis's face.
It's true.
Yes, he finally gets to play a human!
And he gets reunited with his Willow director, Ron Howard.
Yay!
On that note that you were saying earlier about the holiday special maybe still being canon, but maybe not, we also see Lando using one of the holograph recorders to do his basically his vlog. Yeah, his Captain
In
Kirk.
Kirk's starship. Bet you anything you're going to be able to buy a compilation of the Calrissian files as a book at some point.
Well, that's just going to be Gambino's next mixtape.
See, there are things like that where it's like you can tell there were two directors, or not. You can tell that the directors were replaced. It felt like rushed directing, like we literally don't have time to make this scene interesting, so we just have to shoot it. The make-out in the coats scene, it felt like a really wide shot. I'm thinking, you know, even in Empire, when they did this shot, they knew to slowly push in on them and like make it more intimate.
I thought that most of the scenes between him and Kira or between Han and Kira were like awkward and stilted. I just didn't buy almost any of it.
I bought Alden okay as a young Han Solo, but early on he was giving me much more of a young Malcolm Reynolds vibe, which I realize is only one notch removed from Han Solo. Almost everything that the original trilogy hints at regarding Han's backstory happens in this movie. We see him making the Kessel Run, we see him outrunning an Imperial Star Cruiser, and
Lando.
we see what, as far as I can tell, is the entirety of his friendship with Lando pre-Empire. So really, it sort of turns Han in the original trilogy into less of a storied adventurer who has all these tales, and more of the guy who just keeps harping on about his one spring break where he went to Cancun. Like, this all happened in 1 week in his life.
Knowing there's like a 7-year gap, it's like, oh, okay, there's still time for more, so this isn't the only story.
Right.
That being said, can we all take a moment to appreciate the fact that Lando calls Han Han just to mess with him? It's like, hey Han, it's Han. Yeah, whatever.
I love that.
I love that retcon of why it's pronounced Han versus Han in some scenes.
There was actually an issue that the writers of the Old Legends material would talk about, where if you were doing a story with pre-New Hope Han Solo and Lando, no one knew whether or not this story was going to canonically be the last time Han and Lando saw each other. So that resulted that every single time you put them in a story, they have to be on bad terms by the time the story's over. You didn't know whether or not some other novelist was going to reconcile them and then use them and then had to split them up again. That reminds me of like a dozen more points that are only barely tangentially related to... hold on. I'm fired! Damn you, Kathleen Kennedy! Your SJW agenda.
No!
No,
come on! Anyone but him!
No!
Why? Why, John, why?
No! You don't know how to Star Wars!
I actually like the movie, first of all, and also it's either me or the guy that hated Infinity War.
Can we vote? Approved!
A lot of you guys were talking about how you didn't really like the Darth Maul reveal. I actually thought it was like the only thing that really made sense when I put everything together. The crime syndicate is called the Crimson Dawn. He's just a bright red horn dude. I'm like, he's crimson. They say that like the Crimson Dawn came and they like kept ravaging this one planet, and then the planet rebelled against them, and their response was to cut everyone's tongues out, which doesn't seem like Dryan's thing to do. He was very much like a sort of a posh, almost Blofeld type villain. He was very reserved and very like, I will only kill you after you come to me and disappoint me, and then I will kill you with my civilized knife stab weapon. He didn't strike me as the kind of guy that would go around like, But somebody like Darth Maul, a Sith apprentice who has already been cleaved in half and now has robot legs and has probably gone a little kooky just through years of being alive with only really half a body. I feel like that makes way more sense. And when I put it all together, I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going, but I'm on board now. If every movie is like this, where they just kind of give you a little kernel, and it kind of tells you the side story of things that are happening alongside the original trilogy, I think that'll turn out really cool in a way that we haven't seen before. And I don't know how they're going to do that, but I'm super intrigued as to how they're going to pull that off.
Like the McBain thing in The Simpsons.
Sort of, yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of like super fan servicey things, like just putting it in there so that fans can be like, oh, well, I know that. If you're gonna bring Darth Maul back, do something with him. I hope it's just not like, here's Darth Maul because you guys love Darth Maul.
I think the only reason they had him grab the lightsaber was to prove that it was Darth Maul and not just another person of the same species.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was just someone else.
I think the new version has him with just legs, whereas like the old cartoon had him with like spider legs.
That's the picture I've seen.
Lord.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
I know that more matters than just the movies, obviously, and that's why they produce other content. But the movies are like what matters.
Anything in a movie is automatically canon, regardless of what happens. TV shows were second, and then I think books were third, and comic books were basically just didn't even matter.
Well, there was one very important piece of lore expansion introduced in this movie, and that was apparently droids can fuck.
Yeah, it makes some of the stuff at Jabba's palace make a little more sense.
I don't know if you want to call them sentient, but you've granted them like human characteristics over the last 30 years, primarily because of Anthony Daniels, where you like associated them as like, oh, they have like a personality and wants and fears and all these things that we associate with being human. Eventually, you're gonna wonder like, how do you fuck that?
It's probably similar, honestly, to like in The Good Place, how Janice can't get drunk, but if she's around magnets, it basically accomplishes the same thing. There needs to be some kind of electrical charge going through somewhere to circuit the brain and simulate that serotonin.
Humans are really good at enslaving things and then like using them for sex too.
That's
so
true.
I just feel like it didn't take a long time for the first person that had a droid to be like, let's try some stuff here.
I also really liked L3. It's one of the few times where you see a character who just has like a really strong introduction. They just have like a couple lines and a few actions, and you're like, oh, I know what you are now.
Obviously, Lando's in love with me, and it's complicated because I don't feel the same way. Lando's reaction when she died, I was like, oh shit, that wasn't a joke. She was right. Lando's legit in love with her. This is like Tom Hanks watching Wilson float away on the river. Like,
and it totally makes sense that she would be right because she's right about Han.
That's basically as much pansexual representation as we really got with Lando.
Did anyone else have flashbacks to like being a child watching the movie Flubber when he was like holding Weber's dying body?
That's exactly what that looked like, yeah.
So does that mean Donald Glover is the Robin Williams to Billy D. Williams, Fred McMurray?
Yes. My only thing I didn't like about L3 was at first when she started talking, her voice reminded me too much of Phasma's voice. Because it was a lady voice, electrically altered, digitally altered, that I was just like, I wish it was a little more distinct.
We came so close to passing the Bechdel test when L3 and brunette white girl start talking, but then they just talk about Han.
He was part of the Imperial Academy. He was a smuggler, and he was doing all of these things just to get to Emilia Clarke's character.
Yeah.
Which of course I can't remember pretty much any of these names. They're Star Wars names. I can't remember.
It had an I in it, I think.
Hers is Kira. I got that.
We've all had varying reactions to the love story as portrayed in this film. I know this girl doesn't stick around, so I'm just waiting to see how she dies or whatever. Turns out she hasn't yet, but
that shocked me. I thought she was dead for sure.
It really was playing like a subversion of the typical star-crossed lovers thing. No matter what she's done in the past, he's going to forgive her and he's going to stick with her. Except then she ends up leaving him because of her past.
Don't trust anyone, kid. Everyone's gonna betray you eventually, so just only stick out for yourself. And I'm like, oh, well, you just established that either you or Kira is going to betray them.
I thought both.
And then they just keep juggling that ball for like 5 minutes during the climax, and I'm like, you know what? I can't really fault you, Because you're aware that we are so embedded in how stories are told now.
Woody Harrelson's character, like, the love of his life dies, and like the whole mission, like, they don't even get the cargo that for the mission that she died for, and he's not even like, Han, what the fuck? Like my wife just died. It was just like, well, you fucked up, kid, and we'll move from here. If I were this like crusty, hardened like thief, I would mention it at least.
One, it wasn't Han's fault. Right. I mean, the lost cargo was, but his wife died of her own volition.
They didn't even get the cargo.
It's like, hey, if losing the cargo was an option, she wouldn't have blown the bridge right then. Yeah, the thing about not trusting anyone, you trusted her. She trusted you.
Unless that is the reason why he doesn't feel super emotional. It does kind of set up this idea that comes up later on when Han literally calls him his partner, and then he turns around on him anyway. And then after he like gets a little bit of a turnaround again, he still is totally willing to shoot him in the chest. Which I totally appreciate that they established that Han shoots first.
I love that Han shot first and then comforted him as he died. That was a good choice, man. I was gonna shoot you.
It's not just that he comforted him, it's that it feels like because Han went over to him, it feels like there is still character that's going to change between here and A New Hope.
It's interesting that even after betraying Han, he doesn't die alone. He dies with Han. One of the big themes they kept hammering home is you're not supposed to go it alone. The monkey dude in the cockpit, when he's dying, he's like, you know, she was right. Dying alone is no good. And at the end of the movie, even though Han's girlfriend isn't really his girlfriend and like betrays him, he still has Chewie. And actually, that's kind of sad. Han does die alone in the 7th movie. I suppose his son was there, but that doesn't really count because
his son's also the one that killed him.
I mean, although I did just make the point that Han killed Woody Harrelson's character and was still there for him, but that's different. Those were two separate moments. I killed you and
Especially if you look at that moment as being like the birth of Han Solo as we know him.
That's
and then it's reversed by the end in episode 7. I think I didn't think about that.
I just this second realized that Woody Harrelson is the second Cheers cast member to be in a Star Wars.
Wow.
Because John Ratzenberger was an Empire.
The Kessel Run is the first time we see Han fly a ship, and that just feels wrong to me.
He flies a bit while the Jon Favreau monkey is dying.
Yeah.
That's true. But we never get to see him be good at flying a ship until the Kessel Run.
He wasn't terribly good during the Kessel Run either.
That's true.
I fucking love the creature design that's around the maw.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I love that design. I love when aliens just get fucking weird. It looks like some kind of Cthulhu Lovecraftian
That was my thought. I love the reveal of the one eye and then all the other eyes, and you're just like, wait, what am I looking at? I was expecting them to encounter the slug monster from like the asteroid from Empire.
Well,
especially a fan service moment.
Especially because the soundtrack was going back and forth between the shootout, the Falcon shootout from A New Hope, and the asteroid chase from Empire.
Well, and they'd already dropped the line roasted Minox, so they'd already planted that idea in your mind.
Obviously they were CG, but they seem to be like given features to make them still look like they were kind of Muppets. There's that big worm creature at the beginning of the movie. It was one of the moments where I was like, this cinematography sucks, but then it served a purpose. But the problem is that it kept kind of sucking throughout the movie, where I was like, this is the weakest thing, is that the cinematography...
And then sometimes the editing, which I couldn't tell if the editing was bad because the cinematography was bad.
It does feel a bit like they didn't have quite as much coverage as they needed to have.
On the note of the cinematography, the reveal of the Millennium Falcon was garbage.
The garbage will do!
It was badly lit, you didn't get the framing was terrible, and it was a really weak
I get what they were going for. They were getting this kind of like Han looking up at it in awe. But the problem is that should have been way closer on him.
And it was also like backlit. Like the only way I knew that was the Millennium Falcon is because I went, this is the point in the movie where they reveal the Millennium Falcon.
I half expected Han to just quote Luke and be like, it's a piece of junk!
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't because it makes sense this is supposed to be the Falcon in its heyday before Han starts fucking her up. The design of the Falcon, I went, that's wrong. Why is the nose weird? And when he crash lands after the Kessel Run, it's like, oh, because he hadn't broken the front of it yet. I get it.
That makes perfect sense that they would eject the escape pod and never get a new one, because it feels to me like Han is just, if this ship is going down, I'm going to die in this.
But that means in A New Hope, when they go, some of the escape pods have been jettisoned, it's like, Yeah, 8 goddamn years ago, man. Get with the program.
The die that hang in the Falcon, was that like a thing in the original trilogy?
So they were always there, but they were never drawn attention to in the original movies.
Right, there was never like even like a shot.
The first time there's ever been a close-up of them was in Last Jedi,
Okay, well-
which was, you know, long after this. It almost felt like Last Jedi was paying off the thing that was being set up in this movie, but, you know, the emotional weight was played in reverse.
Even in Last Jedi, I was like, I mean, I don't know if anyone else did this, but I had to take a step and be like, oh, okay, that must have been something hanging in Han's ship. Got it, okay.
Every piece of Star Wars has to have a backstory, even if that backstory gets changed 5 times.
I really think the idea of taking a piece of nothing and turning it into something is really cool. But I'm just like, you kind of did it in a weird order.
The gambling scenes, both of them I thought were completely botched. There's no clear way of understanding how the game is played, which means there's no tension in the scene. Because you're just waiting to be told what happened.
I would say that it's playing with your expectations because you already know that Han wins it in this game.
It's true, but that would be better with tension because you're like, okay, there's tension, but I know he's going to win it. And then they subvert it by him not winning it, which I really liked that. Pirates of the Caribbean 2 did the scene better.
I don't know
because
how
you understood the game and what they were betting and...
Well, also, that's a simple dice game, and while you don't get like the specifics, you generally get the idea that they're playing poker.
Right.
They don't even like show you the cards half the time.
No, it's true, and I'm saying that was a mistake. Yeah. I feel like they should have designed the game in such a way that you could at least follow the thread of what was happening.
They were trying to do Casino Royale.
I don't necessarily know if I agree with that because they were really trying to set up more like Han and Lando banter.
In Casino Royale,
and Lando banter.
They show you everyone's cards, or at least enough of the cards that you know who's winning, what the odds are. Like they play with the tension.
Games like that are typically like considered to be based on luck, not about skill. So it would be difficult to be like, oh no, they're winning or losing when it's just like a draw of the card changes everything.
The movie should have ended with Han coming back in with the piece, throwing it down on the table and just going, stake me. And you know at that point he's gonna win the Falcon. It should have just ended there. But obviously with the cheating mechanism, that wouldn't have worked. But if they just cut the cheating mechanism, or if Lando had lost that at some point on their adventure, like used it as a weapon and it broke and he didn't have it.
I do kind of like that it shows that Han is like learning and why, that's part of the reason why I think Lando was particularly pissed at him. You took literally the ace out of my sleeve.
One scene that was definitely a Ron Howard scene was Clint Howard's cameo. Ron Howard made this movie as an excuse to have a robot beat up his brother, and I'm getting some ideas.
Just on the fan service level, I was just really grateful that they didn't shove 3PO or R2 in there because they had so many other things. Like even just like Chewie ripping the guy's 2 arms off. I'm like, okay, I get it. And every time we go in the Falcon, we have to see them playing the game. It's the law now. So.
Did you notice it was the same chess move that R2 did against him?
Yeah, and where he throws him down.
That one move is Chewie's weakness in that game.
I'm not saying it's like The Last Jedi, you gotta see it fucking immediately. Because I loved The Last Jedi. I liked this one. I liked this one a lot. And I think the main reason was because between some of the writing and the set design and even some of the costuming and whatnot, the world feels very lived in. It feels very much like everything has a history. That one guy who cheats at cards by using one of his 6 eyes to look at a person's cards, like that's just a good touch that doesn't matter. And it was weird because they kept doing that most of the time, so every time they failed on it, I was like, why? Like specifically they were saying like 3 years later, I was like, why don't you call it like 3 Corellian years or something, just so it feels like it's a little weirder.
I really did enjoy parts of it, but I just feel quality-wise it was bad. Like, I don't know, that's...
It feels so weird, like every time... What?
God damn it! Yeah, I've been fired too.
I didn't even get to beat you up with the robot.
It's okay, I beat you, I beat his head up for you.
And now it's time for What's the Attraction? Galaxy's Edge is coming next year, and it will include a Millennium Falcon ride. How will that ride, or anything at Galaxy's Edge, or anything at any of the parks really, be affected by the events of this movie? Morgan.
The attraction is, so when you first walk into Galaxy's Edge, you're going to be given a little pair of pliers that you will use to find any sort of any member of the Disneyland crew or cast, I can't remember what they're called, cast members, thank you, cast members, and you will pry off their inhibition disc and they will eventually pry each other's off and they will cause a huge uprising and you will single-handedly cause Disneyland to collapse under the weight of capitalism's overthrow.
I love it. Kate!
Oh, well, I definitely think that there's going to be a Han Solo meet and greet at some point. What Star Wars fan doesn't want to meet Han and Chewie together, you know? So that would be my prediction.
And me.
Well, when Galaxy's Edge opens, when you enter under the train tracks, the train above you will be hijacked by a spaceship. But until then, they are going to reopen the Starcade and just turn it into a gambling den where you can gamble away your car.
Well, as usual, you're all wrong, because what they're really going to do is they're going to add the letter O to the end of every land with the suffix land, so it'll be Adventure Lando, Frontier Lando, Tomorrow Lando, Fantasy Lando, etc.
I quit!
So until next time, you got to know when to hold 'em. Know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to fly.
Now I'm a solo pilot, I'm flying mighty low. My eyes are filling up with clouds, but I'm still on the ground below. My gal just up and left me. She was my whole flight crew.
Howard, you've done it again.
These happy days are yours and mine. These happy days are yours and mine. Happy days.
And my attraction would just be more capes in the gift shops. Capes need to have a moment. We can make this happen, America.
I thought you'd been ejected from the premises by security. Never mind.
With the solo pilot blues.
What a chicken.
With the solo pilot blues.